So this is going to be another performance and performativity within the series that I'm calling and referring to as a pronoun and loving sorting project for Allan Kaprow. And if that's not the name of this project and series, it's fairly close. It may be a pronoun sorting and loving project for Allan Kaprow, or it may be a pronoun sorting and loving series for Allan Kaprow. And elsewhere on my YouTube channel, you can find those introductory pieces that discuss the motivations behind the inception of this piece and why it's dedicated to Allan Kaprow. So I'll leave that exploration and investigation to you, and I'll discuss this piece, which is going to be titled something like Sorting Children's Books by the Pronoun Ted Cruz. And as you see, Ted Cruz is represented in this first image, which is an image of an owl whose name is Teddy Bear. And the reason that his name is Teddy Bear and not Teddy Cruz is obvious. The author probably didn't want to be sued or draw attention to the fact that this is a satirical parody of Ted Cruz, and hence, the use of the owl. The owl is a signifier of knowledge and wisdom, and in a certain sense, antithetical in that respect to Ted Cruz, who seems to know very little about anything, including the parameters of his job, and certainly about the pedagogy of education as represented in children's books. So that's why we're focusing on this image to begin with. But as a disclaimer, I suppose, of some sorts, sort of intellectual disclaimer, I haven't looked at this list of 25 must-have baby books. I've found this. This was the first website that I located when I was looking up essential baby books, and I thought of essential because I guess it rhymes with a piece that we've been looking at that focuses on Anthology Film Archive's creation of the essential film list, and the notable absence of filmmakers of color, particularly American and or Canadian filmmakers of color, in the list of 330 films that, this list was created back in, if memory serves, 1975. I may be a decade or two off, perhaps begun in 1970 or 1972, and created within that time frame by largely white American male experimental filmmakers. And this essential cinema list, as I've been discussing, includes 330 titles by 91 filmmakers who were regarded as essential, and those essential filmmakers, of those 91 essential filmmakers, if memory serves again, I believe 5 of them were women, and of those 91 essential filmmakers in the set, which includes American and or Canadian filmmakers within that set, so that subset of that set of essential filmmakers, 0 of those filmmakers were filmmakers of color. And There is, of course, something now that's referred to as the Black Essential Cinema, and I don't know if the anthology archives have modified their list, but I was calling attention to the absence of this kind of owl. You notice this owl is brown, and I was calling attention to the absence of this type of owl, here referred to as teddy bear. Teddy bear, as I referred to him before, the antithesis of Ted Cruz in some sense. And I was calling attention to the overwhelming presence of this type of owl. It was clearly different kind of owl than this one. So, you know, keeping that in mind, we might want to refer to the idea of what's essential in some way in the title of this piece as well. So I may modify the title to sorting 25 essential baby books by the pronoun Ted Cruz, or in keeping with this this first volume, by the pronoun teddy bear. But that starts to get a little bit complicated, and then I have a problem with some of the pieces that I perform and create. People stop or complain that they're having a difficult time following the logic or the thread, and I think that if the title takes on too many referential trajectories, some of the significance of the title may get lost, and people may have to start to complain that it's difficult to follow. So I think we can retain the idea of the essential and make that reference, and just stick with the pronoun Ted Cruz. So I'm thinking that something like sorting 25 essential baby books, by the pronoun Ted Cruz, not Teddy, because again, that reference gets a little messy. Why Teddy? Is it because we're infantilizing him? Perhaps, but a certain degree of clarity. He's known as Ted in the press, and people refer to him that way and not as Teddy. Should we stick with Teddy or Ted rather than Teddy? I want to, I don't want to, especially keeping in mind that it's a sorting of baby books and not, graduate school books, or, books that you would read in if you were a law student at Harvard, and it's interesting because do we really want sitting members of the Supreme Court to police and censure the books that are in our public education libraries? Presumably, if this series of 25 essential baby books is in the should baby books even really be in the public libraries? Presumably, children are 5 years old by the time they go to school, and unless they're preparatory, say that they're in the high school libraries, and you have young people on the verge of graduation, and some of these individuals, well, you can't, if you're a woman, you can't choose the course of the life of your body anymore, and you know, say that someone like there's a Supreme Court justice named Kavanaugh, and you know, when he was a young man, he attempted to rape a 15-year-old girl, and I guess if you were at that high school and you had been raped by, you know, Judge Kavanaugh, then you could have a baby, and you would be needing to look at these baby books, right? And so, you know, so maybe my suggestion that you know, baby books don't in fact have a place in public libraries, at least public school libraries. So we'll keep them in the, you know, city and county libraries, but not in the school libraries. But maybe that suggestion is misguided, because it's not pre-5-year-olds that, you know, who need to check, you know, these books out and read them, but rather the 15-year-old girl who is you know, restricted by, you know, Judge Kavanaugh and his ideas concerning the rights of women to control the course of their bodies, and aren't allowed, you know, to terminate unwanted pregnancies, and so have to accept the parental responsibility of having a child, whether they want one or not, and, you know, subject to the violence and terror of being raped by these same individuals that are setting these laws, you know, like Clarence Thomas as well, you know, who is certainly a sexual assailant, if not, you know, rapist. So this 15-year-old, you know, will, you know, presumably need to read, you know, books to her baby, and maybe she can acquire some of these at her school library, right? So my first impulse, you know, to censor and remove all baby books from public school libraries was clearly mistaken, and we're particularly going to need them if the configuration of the justice system and the Supreme Court continues to go down this this particular path. Of denying women rights, and you know, in honor of, you know, this path, in honor of Amy Coney Barrett, we just call the Handmaid's Way. So if the Supreme Court, you know, continues to, I really like the way that they did the owl's nose here. I made it a triangle, and if you'll notice that this is the owl's nose, this pink triangle, this upside down triangle, that's the feminine, that triangle, that's the Venus triangle, right, or the triangle that we often see in representations of symbolic representations of the yantras of the goddess, right? The triple goddess. And I like the way that it's very subtle, that upside down, you know, non-patriarchal primitive triangle in this figure of the owl. But I was saying that, you know, we can refer to that course of the removal of women's rights as a part of the conservatization of the Supreme Court as the handmaid's path, or the handmaid's way, you know. So if we're going to continue with The Handmaid's Way, we're certainly going to need to have all of these kinds of essential baby books available in the public education system, particularly, for the older children in high school and, about to graduate and subject to, the violence of individuals like Kavanaugh, whom, not Teddy Bear, but whom, Teddy Cruz was not particularly interested in defending these young ladies against, although Lindsey Graham, had expressed such indignation and outrage at two things that almost seem incompatible. And if the teddy bear, or if the owl named Teddy Bear could speak with her, wisdom that is inscribed within her beak here, I imagine that she would point to and call attention to the weird and hypocritical and paradoxical fact that Lindsey Graham's indignation arose from two incompatible intellectual ideas. The first being that Ketanji Brown Jackson's record indicates that she's, and the use of the word is soft, like she doesn't have an erection for, right? Soft on punishments for individuals convicted of violating laws concerning child pornography, and that's one of those sticks that's thrown out, to get people's temperature up, right? To cause indignation particularly among those representatives of the right, who imagine themselves as, the protectors of women and children, despite the fact that they are the ones that, seated a child rapist, if you consider 15-year-old girls, children, on the Supreme Court to begin with. And then there's, of course, Judge Clarence Thomas and his, sexual record. So the hypocrisy and the irony is, of course, that, Ketanji Brown Jackson is a threat to the safety of our children, but Kavanaugh is not. And also included in that paradox and irony is the indignation that Lindsey Graham, expressed, that how dare you accuse one of these kind of owls of rape. These kinds of owls, have been accused of rape, particularly raping these kinds of owls, for hundreds of years. And part of the psychological structure of racism involves accusing these kinds of owls of raping, these kinds of owls as a justification of murdering and hanging and torturing and publicly displaying the destruction of these kinds of owls. And but now if that's again one of the things that we're not allowed to talk about. If you talk about the history of the murder of these kinds of owls and the way that it was justified by referring to sexual violence directed against these types of owls, and if that history really involves, there was an owl one of these kinds of owls, named Emmett, and the owl named Emmett was murdered and tortured, and those who committed those crimes, were never brought to justice. Now you can be brought to justice for writing about this kind of owl, but Emmett, the violence that he inflicted, well, in fact, there was no violence, but it was enough to say that looking at this kind of owl, right, was an act so offensive that when this kind of owl with his big eyes, her big eyes, I think I refer to as her, looked at this kind of owl, then racism was such a powerful, malignant part of the social psychology of America. And that wasn't that long ago, was it? That this kind of owl, these kinds of owls, and these kinds of owls, murdered this kind of owl, the one named Emmett. Anyway, we're going to go through, and I think I've set, some of the parameters for the way that the evaluation of these 25 essential, baby books is going to go, and we're going to sort them, by, as I said, by the pronoun Ted Cruz, not teddy bear, but with teddy bear, lingering in mind, throughout the sorting, and this particular owl, whose name, here is Teddy Bear, will act as the kind of Iron as muse, lurking in the beneath, the sorting project, or within the sorting project. So we'll go ahead and actually begin the sorting, and I think it'll be relatively, quick. All right. Looks like this book is called Make It Count, and there appears to be a hen counting. Oh, it's big fat hen. All right, well, I think we'll need to ban this book because of the use of the word fat, which is, there are a couple of possibilities in this word fat. It's either referring to a condition of being obese, like Donald Trump or some of the other members of, or some of the other politicians, that we see in locations like the Senate and the House of Representatives, not referring to the skinny ones, right? Like Josh Hawley, or who are some of the other skinny ones. Mitch McConnell, although he's got that hen thing under his chin, but and that's fat, but it's not the way, it's not used the way that fat is used here. But this is offensive, right? Like, why are we calling the hen fat, and why would you call it a big fat rooster? So it's sexist, right? And it's it's a body type verbal insult. And but wait a minute, we as sorting by Ted Cruz, we're not concerned with stuff like that, because that's the stuff that we like, that kind of stuff, right? We like, name calling. And do you think a baby can be body offensive and sexist. Well, if a baby can't be racist, then a baby can't be sexist. So it's okay to have these kinds of, we don't want to be PC, right? So the books that we're looking for, that we want to have, like, have these kinds of language, right? Big fat hen, big fat mama, big fat lady, idea. So this would be good, I guess. So we're going to keep this one, I think. And it's not because we didn't find anything offensive, it's because we did. All right, so that's the first one. All right, so let's look at this one. Good night, moon. Okay, well, this one becomes complicated. We know that fascists hate moonlight, and have at least since the early 20th century, right? And one of Marinetti's most famous volumes was called titled "Let's Murder the Moonlight," right? All right, so maybe it refers to Italian fascism, which we like. Okay, so do you think a baby could be an Italian fascist? We have to ask that question to determine what's going into the essential baby book list. We're gonna have to ask the question in this way: do you think a baby could be an Italian fascist? No. And so this book promotes the idea of a baby being an Italian fascist, but it does it in this humorous way. And then you have, the cow jumping over the moon. We like that because refer to the big fat hen, and then we have the little cow. So I think because fascists hate moonlight, and it's a reference to fascism. Clearly a reference to fascism. Good night, moonlight. I mean, how much clearer could you get than good night, moon, to being a reference to, Let's Murder the Moonlight by Marinetti. I don't think F.T. Marinetti. So I'm gonna, and I've been censored, right, on YouTube. My moon videos have been censored on numerous occasions just because they're moon. So we want to censor moon, and this book is about censoring the moon. So if we're sorting by Ted Cruz, we're going to keep this one. All right. I don't know if this is a book or an advertisement, but you should wash your hands often. I agree. All right. Toes, ears, and nose. All right. I'm thinking this is the first one that we're going to censor in sorting by Ted Cruz, and the rationale for, I may be wrong, and I'll, if I'm wrong, I'll do an errata and I'll come back and I'll change it. But the lift then flip or flop, the lift lift and flop. I'm not sure. Book, toes, ears, and nose. The reason that I'm gonna censor this one is we don't know where those toes, ears, and noses have been, right? And look, the child here is clearly pointing to the nose. This baby wants to put her finger in her nose, clearly, and she's asking for permission. She's holding her hand up. Can I put my finger in my nose? And this is not the kind of thing that promotes upstanding behavior that either leads you to a position on the Supreme Court or elsewhere. So because we don't know where those toes, ears, and noses have been, we're gonna censor this one. So this is the first one that we exclude, even though we like this kind of owl. All right, whoops, missed one. Okay, so here's more ads. We'll keep all those because we like commercialism and capital and. Okay, again, I mean, I don't think there's any question. And then this one has some additional problems, right? For one thing, that this is a Chinese animal, right? The tiger, like they live in China and also India, and that's a whole different economy that doesn't operate, within our nationalist border and our naive, fear of global economy, even though we live in one, right? So it's anti-nationalist because it's a Chinese animal, and then you have, we've done work with, cognitive psychology before, and individuals, will realize that if we recognize this as belonging to the creature giraffe, we do so via reification. We have reified the rest of this image, right? We don't take it as the front of a snake, or you could, I guess. A snake with a very short, nose and a weird eye and a kind of like cartoon-like smile. But I'm taking it as a giraffe's nose, and I'm using reification, to complete that image-creating task. And what I've reified out here is the rest of the giraffe, and then we know that a giraffe is an African animal, so it's a reference to Africa and to China or India, or parts of Asia perhaps. And down here, I'm not sure what that is. That could be a good American animal, but there's only one representation of an animal that, however we reify it, may or may not be an American animal, whereas there's clear representation of a Chinese animal that we don't even need to reify, right? This little guy is all there, and the giraffe, via reification, is there. So that's two non-American animals and only possibly one American animal. So, okay, that's the first part of the need to censor this one. And then, again, you have the same problem with the nose and toes. We don't know where those nose and toes have been. And if you're Tucker Carlson, and have a fear of the other, these noses and toes are potentially contaminating, right? Contaminating our good white American bodies. So definitely need to censor this one. And then I think there's a third rationale in censoring this one. If you notice this one, the name is John Butler. And that's a little too close, I think, for comfort to the pronoun Judith Butler for anybody to be completely comfortable with this volume, right? Anybody within our Ted Cruz pronoun sorting system. So the pronoun John Butler is too close to the pronoun Judith Butler, which makes this potential tiger, I don't know, could be non-binary. And certainly the giraffe's nose, it's difficult to see what's going on down here, but anything is possible. And this one, the hoof, that looks like a dance move, which is kind of interesting. The fact that this can be read either as the front part of an interesting long-necked frog or snake, or it has that duck-rabbit ambiguity to it, doesn't it? In a certain way, unless we were given the rest of the reified giraffe. So all of that, contributes to justification to censor this one as well. So that won't be in our 25. That won't be in our list of essential baby books. Okay, the very hungry caterpillar. Okay, this one is good because, okay, so hunger, if you take hunger as a metaphor for consumption in under capitalism, right? We want consumption. So you can probably click on something and order this from Jeff Bezos' Amazon.com, and then you can participate in that project that Bezos has, which is, as I understand it, it's first do everything you can to destroy this planet that we live on, that we spent millions of years evolving toward being compatible with, right? In other words, our design is based on its design. So destroy this planet first, and then find a planet, such as Mars, which is totally incompatible to human life to begin with, and spend billions and billions of dollars on tiny projects of colonialization and technologically orchestrated, right? Little compartments of living, so that, you know, one could imagine that it's possible, you know, for billions and billions of dollars for a couple of people to live on Mars for, you know, an extended period, like a year or something. You know, you wouldn't, you know, have sunrises or sunsets, because you'd be, you know, entirely confined to these habitations that could sustain human life on a hostile environment, but you could probably do it. So that's you know, part of the project, as I understand it. And you know, we can do that by being greedy and you know, ignoring the fact that, you know, there are no leaves left to eat, right? And this caterpillar is so hungry, and I don't know, I haven't read the book, you know, I may be wrong, but you know, he's just going to eat his way through this world, and, you know, ignore the fact that there's only so much coal and, you know, other kinds of fossil fuel left. And even though, like, he could eat, you know, sunlight, he's just going to continue eating his way through the world. So the very hungry caterpillar we're going to keep on the proviso that he does, in fact, you know, consume his way through the world, and then you know, relocate to some hostile environment like Mars. All right, OnlYy. Yes, okay. Here, we're going to keep this one because, you know, the whole point of the pronoun sorting project, right, is to look at these positionalities and what they represent, and to look at the white male fragility that, you know, someone like Allan Kaprow demonstrated back in the early 80s when he, you know, criticized my use of the pronoun she in looking at a Yoko Ono piece, although the positionality was, you know, clearly one of she, and wanted it replaced with he, right? And the whole point of the pronoun sorting project is to look at the privilege of certain positionalities and the way that only they can be universalized, right? And what I like about this OnlYy, even though it's not only he, which would be even better, but the you, if you look at it, the capitalized Y in the you looks like, you know, someone standing, you know, and with their arms up. And I'm imagining, you know, this is a male Y, because it, you know, we have in genetics you have X and Y, right? So if it was only shu, then it would be different, but it's only you. So OnlYy, you know, OU. I like that. Only the masculine pronoun. And then you know, people like the author of those Harry, you know, Potter books. I can't remember what her pronoun is. The one that sorts by pronouns of biological imperative. Someone will know. It's something like J.K. Rowling or Rowling or Rowling. You know, I can't, like Josh Howley, I can never remember how to pronounce her name, but it's something like that. But if there's any confusion about who it is, it's the author of those Harry Potter books. And you know, she is very, you know, she is very adamant about the fact that, you know, one should only use these pronouns of biological imperative. And the imperative here is inscribed in the very genetic structure itself as the Y. So only, you know, OnlYy, and then the Y is repeated twice, which we don't really have in genetics, because even boys or men like Ted Cruz have, you know, they probably don't admit it, or they might not know it, because I doubt if, you know, Ted Cruz, you know, knows that much about science, you know, even though he seems to have read a lot of baby books. But I don't know if they know it, but they don't have two Y chromosomes unless they have a genetic condition. But they have an X here, under the OnlYy, so it's not scientifically accurate, but I like that about it too, because if we're sorting by Ted Cruz's, we don't like science, right? So getting it wrong is another plus, right? The why only you, can be used as a pronoun. So oddly, it's the mother and the daughter here seem very happy and confident about that. It's like the only you stands in for the missing father, right? So the missing father is no longer a problem because we have this mandate and this law that only male pronouns can be used. So the father can go do whatever he wants. He can abandon the mother and the child, and if he's that Supreme Court justice named Kavanaugh that potentially created this child by by directing sexual violence against this woman. If this woman is 15, you can't tell in the cartoon representation, but she could easily be a 15-year-old mother, with a child, or I guess this child isn't just a baby. So if this child is, 2 or 3, she'd be 17 or, closing in on 18 already, and then beginning to have rights almost. Well, not because, well, actually no, because she's a woman, and so she doesn't have rights because we've never actually passed the ERA or any substantial legislation like that. But and obviously under the handmaiden's path or way, that's not anywhere in the near future. But in any case, whether Kavanaugh is the father of this child or not, he can do whatever he wants and go wherever he pleases on the Supreme Court or elsewhere, because the OnlYy is, standing in for the missing and absent father. I love this book. And then the Robin is perhaps a reference to Christopher Robin of the Winnie the Pooh series, and once again, a reference, but this time in a non-ironic way, right, to Teddy Bear Cruz, the owl known as Teddy Bear Cruz. Don't text and car. Yeah, I think that's probably good advice. Don't text and car. 10 little fingers and 10 little toes. Right. Okay, so again, we're going to keep this one right off. Okay, so we've got a reference to fox. We've got a reference to both meme and men, and a distortion of the word mom, illustrated by Helen Oxenbury, perhaps a reference to the Oxford English Dictionary, again, which is, pretty patriarchal and institutional. Helen of Troy, we have a demonstration of the 10 fingers and toes. How those 10 fingers and toes help you to learn how to do things like swing. You can hold the ropes, because it's an ableist book, right? It's promoting the values of 10 little fingers and 10 little toes. If you have anything less, the implication is then 10 little fingers and 10 little toes, you're unfit for the swing, which I imagine might be difficult. I met a young man back in the 80s, whom I refer to as Denny, and he was on a field trip, and the other children were climbing a tree and playing around a tree, and he didn't have he had 10 fingers and he had 10 toes, but he didn't have the kind of mobility that the other children have, and so he was set aside. He was there, he was present, and he was also blind, and he had some cognitive differences that made the way that he processed the world, unconventional and different from the other children. And as an analogy, in this image, all of the children would be in the swing, but he was, sitting off to the side. He wasn't in this swing. And as an analogy, his differences were that, his fingers and toes didn't, allow him to participate in the swinging activity, even though it was a different activity. But, a lot of my work, has been based on addressing stuff like that. And I'm absolutely positive that Ted Cruz doesn't know anything about my work, but I'm also absolutely positive that if he did know anything about my work, he would despise it from top to bottom and find some way of dismissing my concern, for individuals like Denny. I also like the way this child is wearing a tie. So we asked this question, like, Ms. Katanji Brown Jackson, do you really believe that babies can wear ties? And she could say, absolutely, Mr. Cruz. And what about 10 fingers and toes? Do you think that a baby should have 10 fingers and toes? Well, put that way, right? Like I wouldn't have denied Denny 10 fingers and toes. My So, a lot of what people like Ted Cruz does has to do with the way that you frame it. Would you deny any baby, the condition of having, 10 fingers and 10? Well, no, like if you have them, great. What we're denying is that if you don't have the 10 fingers and toes, that, you still deserve to exist, right? And you still deserve to go to school, and you still deserve to have a life that's free of torture and bullying, and you still have the right to have a job, and you have all these potentials, whether you have the 10 fingers and toes or not. So the base 10 and all of that good stuff, and how it's related to biology. Conservatives love that. They love to like put it back on like our body, right? So our body was created by God, and in that respect is this image of perfection, and anything that falls outside of it, is an abomination, right? So 10 fingers and 10 toes. I'll even do this, and all right. That was 5, but I have to hold the camera. I would give it, 10 thumbs up, but I don't have the 10 thumbs. Orange, pear, apple, bear. Oh, I love it. Okay, so our project started by sorting, right? And we sorted fruit, if I recall, because the piece that we were responding to was a piece by Allan Kaprow, that, or at least it was an image from a piece by Allan Kaprow that involved a young, attractive woman squeezing oranges. And I had made the claim, and I'm sure that I'll offend people in the avant-garde happening fluxus and performance art world by saying this. But I've critiqued Kaprow's works on a number of occasions, and one of the most simple, critiques and basic observations that I've made about Kaprow's work, and why I find it less interesting than a lot of his peers, even though conceptually. I like the idea of the happenings, and I like the surface level of radicality in Kaprow's construction of the idea of an art that doesn't leave an artifact behind. But this is the basic grammatical gist of this critique, is that if you look at Kaprow's various descriptions and instructions for happenings, almost entirely, all of Kaprow's happenings seem to be metaphors of male heterosexual sexuality, right? And and I just don't find that interesting or relevant or radical. And it seems to me that it points back to, and Kaprow may have been unconscious of it, but it points back to this very, very old tradition of male artists painting nude women, and and they're sometimes they are actually nude in Kaprow pieces, and so it's very interesting that he formulates it as this entirely radical and new revolutionary procedure, the happening, and yet it refers to this very old European tradition of art as male sexual exploitation of female body. And so so we began with a sorting of fruit by gender, and I believe that the fruit included oranges and lemons. And that's one of the reasons that I want to include this, but also because orange right now, and I find it, I find it troubling and disturbing, but it is difficult not to associate anything orange, like this orange, with Donald Trump's face, and therefore, this politics of the far right and fascism. So that's good for Ted Cruz because it refers to the orange. This is Donald Trump maybe here, and then he's balanced in this curious way, and then it has all this internal rhyme, right? Like pear and bear, and then so the sorting is really interesting because we sort back in relationship to teddy bear, which is a reference to Ted Cruz. So here he is again, or the iron representation of Ted. So this could be an owl, I suppose. Now, in the owl here, though, unlike the other owl that had Ma Devi's triangle, her triangular yantra, her feminine triangle, this owl's nose is quite different. And I won't say what it looks like, and if it were one, it would be like a short, fat one, like a little short one, but a fat one, right? And unlike the triangle of Ma Devi's nose, it doesn't refer to something feminine, right? Okay, that's the clue, right? Okay, so, and then the little eyes, like those little teddy bear owl eyes, right? Which suggests that, it's interesting because bears don't have those kinds of eyes, and certainly owls don't have those kinds of eyes. These ears look very much like owl ears. Horned owl ears, not long-eared owl ears, but horned. There's some kind of horned ear, right? Which, in fact, on an owl isn't actually an ear, but a tuft, right? That relates to both the way that the owl moves her head, if it's a her, as it was in the other image, or I'm claiming it's a male here, but the way that the owl moves her or his head, and flight, and the silencing of flight and visualization. Anyway, these long evolved tufts that are in fact not ears have significant function in these types of horned owls that are not the completely round-faced owls. Okay, so then there's the balancing act of all of these different kinds of sortings. So you have two examples of fruit, right? You have one example of color. You also have different, there are different ways of reading these in terms of grammatical categories. Like you could read them all as nouns, right? But you could also read this first one as an adjective. So I like that. And then this one, apple, we've just done some work with different kinds of apples. Is it a reference to, the apple that Eve, stole from the tree of knowledge, which was forbidden, right? There was a law, just like we have laws about what women can do with their bodies now. And she violated that law and she was punished. So it's Eve's fault, right? It's this woman's fault that, we commit sin in the first place and that we don't live in paradise. And so it's misogynist in a certain sense. And so So we like that because, you know, we're Ted Cruz and we're misogynists and we're fascists and we have all these laws that limit women's ability to do things, and they certainly women, whatever they're doing with their bodies and wherever Kavanaugh is at the time, they shouldn't be stealing these apples from these forbidden trees and eating them and sharing them with their husbands, right? So that's there, and then maybe it was an apple, maybe it was a pear, or pear, you know, could refer to the lovely form, right? You know, pear-shaped woman, and then that's again, you know, goes back to what, you know, women are really good for. And even the pear has a kind of like phallic thing going that makes it kind of interesting. We're not gonna worry too much about whether that pear is non-binary here, because there's so much else going on that we like with the teddy bear, with the apple, and then, you know, maybe it's a reference to Apple products, and you know, the advancing apple. Here, I'm gonna see if I can do. This is a reference to the Hollis Frampton film. Right. Okay, and then this, if I can get in there close enough. This is a reference to my response to the Hollis Frampton film. All right, so we're going to keep this one, and we're closing in on an hour. I may be able to sort one more essential baby book by the pronoun Ted Cruz. I may or may not. We'll have to do this one very quickly, and I'm going to say no on this one. Well, Ted, here an ad just covered up the image. Oh, there it goes. I'm sure that, you know, sorting by Ted Cruz, we would say yes to the double mellowed on the rocks, but we have to say no to Rosie's Walk, because I don't know this book, but there seems to be I think this is a fox, and by reification we know it's a fox only because we are covered by rocks here. But Rosie's Walk could possibly refer to Rosa Parks, right? And the fact that she had to walk because of systemic and structural racism in the laws that the civil rights movement set out to change. And if you recognize that the sort of systemic racism that's referred to in critical race theory must exist, or we wouldn't have even had a civil rights movement, right? We couldn't have changed the laws if they weren't inherently racist, right? So Rosa Parks and her actions and all actions of those individuals that belong to the NAACP, you know, since its inception and organization, and all of those individuals who, you know, always, you know, attempted to change the law from Frederick Douglass, you know, through, you know, whoever, and all of those individuals who struggled, you know, outside of the law, also including Frederick Douglass, but other individuals like Harriet Tubman, point to the fact that, of course, there's systemic racism and built into the laws of the United States. Always has been. Slavery, the very idea that of slavery is systemic and economic. It's not something that renegade people did that was outside of the Constitution or the law. It's written into it, and that's just a fact of history. So the fact that this book, you know, seems to point to that. The ad moved of its own accord, and you can now see that I was right, you know, about my reification, in fact, was right, and it is a fox, and he's looking at the hen that he either let the hen out of the hen house, and this could be the same big fat hen that now I can't even remember whether we censored her or not. I think we didn't censor her because we like to use these words, and if we ask the question, can a baby be misogynist and ableist and offensive, according to significations of body type, and the answer would come, loudly back, no, with an exclamation point. So we kept the big fat hen, and apparently we're feeding her to Tucker Carlson. This would be like Apple advancing. This would be Tucker advancing. And then this one, if we wanted to do it in a different way, this would be Tucker retreating. So we're censoring this one according to the pronoun Ted Cruz.